Hello again, friends. Welcome into Gamecock Central Radio. Emerson Phillips with Wes Mitchell talking Gamecock football today. Wes, we're going to get to some recruiting here in just a moment, but before we do that, I wanted to talk about this Marcus Lattimore situation that arose yesterday. Lattimore speaking to the Ninth Commission on Injuries in College Athletics, and sounded like some of his comments were taken out of context.
Yeah, absolutely. There were some tweets sent out yesterday. Basically, not even quoting Lattimore, just paraphrasing him, talking about his comments to the Night Commission about player safety. He was asked to go speak sort of as a representative of college football players. As one of the guys there, to speak on player safety. And he made some comments about feeling like there are too many injuries in the, in weight rooms, in strength programs. And obviously, some conclusions were jumped to, I think, by some about, Lattimore is bashing, either Craig Fitzgerald or Joe Connolly, who were South Carolina strength and conditioning coaches. And Lattimore actually spoke to Chris Clark there, with us, Gamecock Central, via text, and sort of clarified his comments, which we threw on the front page. But Lattimore essentially, wanted to clarify the point that was his take from talking to multiple players across programs all over the country, was that too many injuries were happening in the weight room, that it was a sort of a grand scheme thing, that needed to be, there needed to be maybe more oversight as far as strength and conditioning goes, not a sort of bash on Lattimore's personal experience at South Carolina with that strength staff.
Yeah, it sounded to me like this whole Lattimore deal was much ado about nothing. So that has pretty much been put to bed at this point. Wes, last week we talked about wide receiver Shawn Smith out of Brunswick, Georgia. He committed to the Gamecocks last week, and you got a chance to catch up with him this week.
Yeah, I did. Talk to him on Monday night, I guess. And, the kid is very, very excited to commit to South Carolina. He is going to take some other visits. That's very more and more common in today's recruiting world. Kids rarely just completely shut it down this early. But so he's committed to South Carolina. Going to take some other trips, but he's not a guy that I would be super worried about if I'm a South Carolina fan. Some kids you sort of see early on they commit, and it's a very, very, very light commitment. I wouldn't put him in that category, even though he wants to take some trips. And I say that mainly because of the relationship with Brian McClendon, who is not only his recruiter, but also his future position coach. The bond those guys have is very, very strong. McClendon was actually recruiting Shawn Smith when he was at Georgia as well. And, McClendon had Georgia in the lead at that time when he was recruiting them there. Now, of course, recruiting to South Carolina. There's some connections with Brunswick and McClendon as well, some family connections there. And, it's a kid that really, really wants to play for Brian McClendon. So I think a really good pickup for South Carolina. I was watching some of his film. He's a guy that pretty much could play outside, but I think South Carolina wants to play from the slot at receiver, and even could do some wildcat things, I think, at quarterback, because that's something he does in high school. So really, really nice pickup for South Carolina.
You can read Wes's interview with Shawn Smith on the message board on Gamecock Central. That is free content. Emerson Phillips and Wes Mitchell here on Gamecock Central Radio. You can download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. To subscribe to the podcast, search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. In-state recruiting, Wes, South Point defensive end Eli Adams is a 2018 prospect, picked up an offer from the Gamecocks recently.
Yeah, I think I personally love talking about in-state guys getting big offers. I like to see the state of South Carolina kids, having success. And Adams is a kid that's just really, really good on the football field, but his height has held him back. He's about 6'1". Traditionally, coaches want to see defensive ends with those, at the very least, 6'3", but really more 6'4", 6'5", 6'6" frames. And Adams just does not have that. But South Carolina, able to take a chance on him, offers him first. I think they'll fit him in at that buck position. I think they have a little more freedom to take guys that maybe don't necessarily have perfect height, because they're a little bit better fit, I think, because they can still fit into that buck position, because they're going to move that guy around, bring him from different angles. He's got to be able to play in space, which is something, Adams is going to do in high school this year. And, I think really a good fit for South Carolina's system. And, and a good early offer because, Adams is the type kid, he had, I think maybe 18 sacks last year as a sophomore. So this is a kid you're talking about who's very, very productive. And, he's a class 2018 kid. So if he hits that extra growth spurt and, ends up 6'3", 6'4", I think every program in the country might be after this kid. So South Carolina hopping on in early on an in-state kid. You see them making the Palmetto State a priority. That's something they've talked about, but then they've turned around and put it into action as well. So I think a good early offer. And this is also a guy that grew up sort of over in the lower Richland area. Even though he's in Rock Hill now, he grew up about 30 minutes from Williams-Brice Stadium. Grew up a South Carolina fan in South Carolina. He didn't want to name any, leaders, but I think you look at all those factors, and the Gamecocks really put themselves in a good position early on with Eli Adams. And again, I think, I'll say it over and over and over. You got to continue to make that Rock Hill area, the Rock Hill, South Point, Northwestern sort of pipeline. You got to continue that. You got to do everything you can to get those guys. And, obviously, you got Darion Kendrick there at South Point as well, class 2018. If you're South Carolina, you've got to make that area a priority.
South Point High and Rock Hill continues to produce first-rate football talent, elite football talent, so we'll continue to keep an eye on 2018 prospect defensive end Eli Adams. Wes, what else will you be tracking recruiting-wise the rest of this week?
I'll tell you, there's a kid I'm sort of paying a lot of attention to right now. Is actually South Aiken athlete Tansy Richardson. He kid that could play cornerback or wide receiver. South Carolina's talking about him, for playing defense. Actually has seen his stock increase a little bit as of late. Picked up a Mississippi State offer. That was his first SEC offer. And Travaris Robinson has been in touch, South Carolina's defense coordinator. And you know what? I actually have a feeling he could land a Gamecocks offer, possibly as early as the end of this week. Richardson, I understand, is going to be down there to check him out at the scrimmage on Friday. And, I think you look at South Carolina and what they need at defensive back this class. They're going to have to take a bunch of guys, I think. So it's not just a quality thing, but a quantity thing as well. So I think have a little bit of an under-the-radar in-state kid who's a very good athlete, who's very interested in South Carolina. I know they want to sort of land some of these higher, more highly recruited guys that are out of state at the defensive back spots. But if you're going to fill out those, the quality of this class as well at that position, I think it makes sense to take a chance on a couple of, a little more under the radar guys. So Tansy Richardson, a kid I've been hearing things about for a long time now. His stock's sort of on the rise, and I wouldn't be surprised to see South Carolina deliver an offer at some point this week.
Fantastic. Thanks for the update, Wes.
All right, Emerson, we'll talk to you soon. I want to check us out, GamecockCentral.com.
All right, Wes Mitchell continues to do an outstanding job for us. I'm Emerson Phillips. We appreciate you joining us on Gamecock Central Radio, and we'll be talking a lot more Gamecock football here to come in the coming weeks and months right here on Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for being with us.